There are photos that are being released of the secretary as she is testifying from inside this room. Can you please advise me as to whether or not that's permissible and consistent with the rules, particularly given that we have asked for a public hearing? If there are photos that are being released of the secretary as she is testifying, can you please explain how that
I'm done with this. If you guys are doing that, I am done. You can hold me in contempt from now until the cows come home. This is just typical behavior.
We will go off the record.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
So I would like to understand how that's permissible.
Before the hearing was,
It doesn't matter. We all are abiding by the same rules.
I will take that down.
Yeah,
So
well,
I would like to take a break at this moment.
yeah,
I'd like to have
I'm
a
done
conversation.
for now.
Excuse me, can I interrupt?
Somebody sitting in the White House who's leading us down a shithole. I can't personally understand how a convicted felon, 34 felonious, is that word? Counts of wrongdoing gets to be president. How do you do that? I mean, you say, well, he was camped. I don't care. That ruling went down before he stepped into the Oval Office. So it just doesn't make sense to me. Well,
Well, there you have it. Welcome to Black Press USA's morning show, where we bring you the headlines and the culture. And before we get into those videos, I want to introduce our guest co-host this morning. She's a TV and film critic and host of the Jill Munroe Show on KBLA's Talk Radio. That's Tavis Smiley's radio show here in LA. And she's a contributor to the legendary EUR Web. Welcome, Jill Munroe.
Thank you so much for having me, Neil. I'm excited to get into these topics.
I'm glad that you're here this morning. And you know, first we started off with former Senator and Secretary Hillary Clinton. And her videos are going viral from her testimony that she had into the Jeffrey Epstein files. And she was not holding back, and she was going toe to toe. What were some, first of all, did you see some of those clips?
I saw a few of them floating around. I mean, she really came for them. She was tired of it. And to a degree, I have to agree with her, because where are the others? Why are they not being brought in to question and sit?
Right. It's a little wild. And then you saw Morgan Freeman, who just, you know, told it like it is and says how a lot of Black people feel in this country about, you know, how a white man, a convicted multiple felony counts, can be in the White House, you know, starting World War III, you know, taking away a lot of the fundamentals and foundation institutions in our country, systemically designed or not, and of course some problems, but to just dismantle our entire federal government is insane. So I think Morgan Freeman, you know, spoke to not just how a lot of Black folks feel, but everybody feels about this current administration.
I mean, who doesn't agree with that? I know that there are some that are misguided, but ultimately we have been dragged so far back as far as politically what we stand for, what America's supposed to stand for. And now, as you mentioned, we're on the brink of World War III. Who would have thought we would be the ones living through unprecedented times?
For sure. And I know KBLA Talk 1580, Tavis Smiley's radio station, they take a deep dive into politics over there. You have, of course, Tavis Smiley, Dominique DePrima, Nicordeli Corte, You have James Farr, who's constantly on the front lines about what happened to Altadena. I know you have Angela Reddick, who does what does she do?
She has the weekend show. Yes.
The legal lens, right?
Legal lens, yes.
Mhm.
And there's Jesse Jackson Jr., who also has a show, Afternoons. And, you know, they really take a look at the issues, have people on and talk about them in a real way and how it impacts us.
Yeah, I love it. And then they lighten it up with your show, which
Yes.
gives us more pop culture. And of course, Zoe Williams, who does more of relationships and
relationship and healing and inner
and that Zoe stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, you guys check them out, KBLA. And we'll get more into your show. But the chat is always involved in our conversation. So you definitely want to check in and tap in over there as well. So Orangey, of course, is reminding folks that today is a huge voter day in our nation. And we're going to get into that a little more. But he's saying get out the vote. Trixie is saying good morning. Southbound is checking in. JSU in the building. We love our HBCUs. Mike V is saying grand rising to myself and you and Greer, and Michelle Madison is tapping into, and then there's a lot of others who kind of just sit back and chime in when they hear something that sparks their emotion. So good morning, everybody. And we always start with the morning poll. And so, this morning, it's just like, we want to know, how you eat your grits. Okay. It's just that simple. So when it comes to the ultimate Southern breakfast table staple, where do you guys stand on the grits debate? It's early. Some of y'all might already be stirring the grits, but is it A, team sugar? Is it B, team salt and pepper? Team C, cheese? Or team D, the new style with shrimp? So how y'all eating y'all grits? How about you? We'll start with you, Jill.
So I'm team D? No, E, all of the above.
Oh,
like I can do a little sugar occasionally. It's not my preferred style, but I've had it and it's been tasty for me. I'm, for the most part, salt and pepper, a little sprinkle of cheese, but shrimp and grits is good.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm all of the above depending upon the day.
It's so funny. I love us because every time we do a poll, everybody always selects the letter that's not there. It's never the options. It's always something, the secret menu. Okay.
Right.
But for me, I think I'm not a big grits eater. It's something that I acquired as an adult. But I definitely want sugar because I'm a cream of wheat girl, right? And so I kind of want to make it like that. But then I love a shrimp and grits. I like the roux in the grits. So I think I'm A and D. Chat, you can chime in too. Don't be slow. Don't be scared. Oh, what do we have? So Dr. Marilyn says B, C, and D. So she's almost like you. Good morning, Sandra. Southbound says grits with brown gravy and grilled onions. Oh, that sounds like liver. No, I'm just but see, never thought about it. But if you throw a shrimp in it, you got shrimp and grits. Because the shrimp has a roux. Michelle Madison says B, I love grits with just butter and salt and pepper, team B. Helen says she's team A and D. Okay, so she likes the sugar and she likes the shrimp. And Mike V says Nielle like her cream of wheat with lumps. No, I have perfected my cream of wheat to where there are no more lumps. And it's just, I had some yesterday. And Aquarius says salt. So yeah, keep chiming in and tell us how you like your grits as we get into the grit of the news that's impacting and uplifting Black Americans. So our top story this morning, we start in New York, where Mayor Zohran Mamdani is apologizing and setting the record straight. So he recently spoke to historian and podcaster LaToya Coleman and admitting to overlooking the contributions of Black Americans. Take a look at this.
Sometimes we hear people say this is a city built by immigrants, but how do we also include enslaved people, indigenous people who have built the foundation of America in New York City as well?
So I have to admit, I've been guilty of this myself.
I didn't want to say
It's true.
I didn't want to blame yourself.
I did say that
Okay.
myself. And I think the first thing is, if we're being honest, then we have to tell the full story, right? And when we tell a sweeping generalization like that, we lose sight of the fact that Black New Yorkers helped to build New York City.
I felt some type of way.
Understandable.
You know?
Understandable. That's why I'm here to apologize, because you learn from it. And I think that as much as we want to, and we should support immigrant New Yorkers and their incredible place in the city, doing so doesn't necessitate that we overlook the contributions of Black New Yorkers. We can tell that full story.
Oftentimes we hear people.
So, he caused a big stir. He's fumbled with Black folks a few times, even during his election. But I mean, is he learning as he goes, or is this, a mixed apology?
I'm going to give him grace and say there's room for him to learn as he grows. But I think it is a continued pattern overall in America in general to overlook the what Black Americans enslaved and currently have done for the infrastructure of America. We were there. It's on the backs of our labor that a lot of people were allowed to build their wealth, their business structure, their foundation, and that often gets bypassed as just a part of the mix.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not surprising in that aspect, but we were 20% of colonial New Yorkers at the time when this nation was created. And I think in New York, the Black population is still somewhere close to that number. So the oversight seems kind of crazy because these are your constituents.
Right. Greer, our producer, says we are all immigrants up in this joint. Orange says hell of a lot of Black New Yorkers will say their ancestors weren't enslaved. Some are calling him a socialist. But I think you brought up some really good points. And for some reason that, most people, this country was established, Indians were here, Black and white. It's Black and white, and most of this country was built on the backs of Black slaves, right? And Black folks. And we do have no matter what the nationality is, always seem to get overlooked, or like our contributions are not as valid as what they know today. And it's just sad. So my pastor sometimes says some people are innocently ignorant. And maybe that was just an innocently ignorant moment for Mandami, but he heard his constituents and he responded. Southbound says he never wanted to admit it anyway. His back was against the wall. He's the same old. So I mean, hey, this is, we give you the facts and then you give your views and opinions. That's just what it is. Let's head to Georgia, where Democratic Rep David Scott was photographed at the Georgia State Capitol fouling to qualify for the Georgia Democratic primary election. And many are questioning that is who's running against him. He's young. But David Scott is in a wheelchair and he's like in his 80s. And so he was fouling, and a lot of the people in Georgia are like, it's time for him to sit down. And last fall, when he was first seen in a wheelchair entering the Capitol, he yelled at a photographer and called them a son of a bitch. And that's according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, okay? That, I got it from there. I just want you to know, I'm not pulling this out. It got it from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Called the photographer a son of a bitch because they were recording him in a wheelchair. But it goes back to that conversation. Is it time for some of these elected officials, 75 and above, to pass the baton?
I mean, I think so. I think that at a certain point, your legacy also depends on your tree. who you have brought up behind you and positioned to continue the fight. You can't do it forever. And there needs to be a generation behind you that can take up that cause. And you need to make room for that. Maybe be there as an advisory. Plus, at this stage, obviously, we don't know what, not going to speculate, but there's something happening health-wise. And the stress of a job like this can interfere with your performance. I'm not saying that you can't perform at that age, but at some point you have to pass the legacy on so that someone else can continue the fight. How else is that going to happen if you do not lift up those that are behind you and sometimes younger?
Right, right. I mean, we have that conversation right now going on where there's a challenger against Maxine Waters. And so it's like we love the contributions, but the question does arrive. Sandra Brown Jones says, heck yeah, there should be term limits. And I think when we talk term limits, I mean, especially with the Supreme Court. Can you hear me, Jill?
I can. Yes.
Okay, do you see her? Okay.
Yes.
Especially with the Supreme Court. And from a federal, and as we see state levels, it's like some people do not want to give it up. We saw that Eleanor Holmes, who's 90, it took a lot of persuasion and a lot of probably phone calls and mother homes, mother homes.
I understand that this has been such a part of their identity, and maybe it helps in some degree their drive to keep living, but you have to find fulfillment in other areas because we have seen the results of someone outstaying their time in the job. Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
And look at what happened to us. Now we're one seat short.
Exactly. And I mean, to the point where she could have stepped aside, been honored, allowed President Obama at the time to appoint someone in that seat, and perhaps we wouldn't be where we are currently. I think that there's something that speaks to that, and just empowering those behind you and around you to continue the bigger message of it all.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Some of the chat is chiming in, and I want to start with Nancy Wall because I was thinking the same thing. It's not just our side. Like she brought up, Mitch McConnell needs to be removed. Also, he can't even walk. Every time I see, there's a clip of him falling down, and him, deer in headlights when he's speaking, just freezing. Which I also see a pattern starting to happen with Donald Trump.
And they refuse to accept that. I mean, I just, to me, if you are really in this for the betterment of the people, you are there to serve the people, then you should see where at this current time you are a hindrance, so to speak, to that progress. And respectfully get behind someone. You can still be involved. I feel like you can still play a role. It doesn't mean that your voice will be silenced, but it does mean that we are positioned to move ahead. Obviously, with health in mind, with connection to who is coming behind us. I just think that there are more ways and roles, and we need to recognize that it feels a bit narcissistic.
Right. Dr. Mellon says Hot Wheels here in Texas needs to go too. Orangey says as long as they have corporate money, they ain't leaving. So Capitalist brings up a good point. That's age limits, not term limits. So there are two things that we have. Well, I think it's three things too, because I also think of tenure. A lot of conversations I was having yesterday. We had former Assembly member Mike Davis on. And so, we were talking about, tenure, right? And a lot of times you only get that. I mean, the concept of tenure is, the longer you stay, the more power you yield, right? And so if the Democrats take back over Congress in November, then Maxine Waters will return to chair of the Finance Committee, right? And so if she were to leave, then that Black power or Black representation in leadership will disappear because it will go to the next senior person. And so it's kind of like we're kind of stuck because we want to maintain the power. You know, when we talk about Black representation, when we talk about the importance of the Congressional Black Caucus, right? And so it's kind of like, you know, what do you do? Do you want to maintain the power of tenure for these people who have been there? But then you also see that they're kind of losing that flair that we loved about them when they were younger. So, I mean, the whole federal government and the system, as you see, when you think about it, it all needs a overhaul.
It does. But where do you even start? I mean, I respect the idea of tenure because I'm not saying, obviously, experience is key to seeing a bigger picture, being able to bring in perspectives that one may not be able to grasp just because they haven't had the, you know, the luxury of time in some cases. But I do think that cognitive health, things that impede you from doing your role, should be examined. And unfortunately, not wanting age discrimination because we're all going to age, but I do think that there should be some checks and balances. And then for me, I'm just speaking internally for these individuals. I think there has to be strategy attached to it, as you mentioned with Maxine Waters, but I also think intrinsically within them, they should take a moment to think about the future and not just what it lies for them, but how we aren't in this position where we have to constantly strategize and hold on to something because we don't have people positioned in other areas.
Right. And so there's some other interesting comments from the chat. We have from Lauren Live Show, there are white members who are old as hell in all caps, who no one talks about with real power. Chuck Grassley, he's 92. Hall Rogers is 88. We did talk about Mitch McConnell as well, Lauren. But to the point, you know, this is across the board. And then I remember when Jasmine Crockett tried to challenge and run for chair, and they kind of ignored her and overlooked her. And so, I mean, I think on multiple levels, when we talk about, you know, tenure, when we talk about age limits, when we talk about term limits, these are conversations that really have to change. I mean, Trump then blew up the entire federal government anyway. So, you know, let's just knock it all off and get it back on the trajectory of what America represents now. Right. And I think the younger generation, as we see what's happening in Georgia, we see what's happening here in California, that's happening anyway. And for Soul Capitalist, Waters is not in a Black district. Well, she is. Hawthorne is predominantly Black. It's a lot of Black folks in Hawthorne, wouldn't you say? And Lawndale as well. So they did move her office out of South LA into Lawndale, Hawthorne, which is a predominantly Black community here in Los Angeles. But they also did give her parts of Torrance, which is predominantly white. She has Westchester, which is over here by the airport. So, you know, they just kind of moved her around, but she still has a huge Black constituency out here. And they are 10 toes down for her. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But moving back to Georgia, Keisha Lance Bottoms became the first Democratic candidate to qualify for governor yesterday. And take a look at how much joy she had doing it.
Hey, I'm standing in line with my husband. We are going in so that I can fill out my paperwork to officially qualify to run for governor of this great state. I was always told that my grandmother's grandfather, Shepherd Pete, served during Reconstruction as a representative. He was once enslaved in Crawfordville, Georgia. And now I'm walking through these doors to qualify to run for governor of this state. And it's this reminder that the work that we do today is not just about us, It's for generations not yet born. I know my ancestors are looking down on me. They're cheering me on. This is an exciting.
So, I mean, I thought that as a Black woman, seeing her, you know, her lead Atlanta, that I thought that was like, you know, we're still thriving, we're still on the front line. When people say, "Where are Black people?" They running for office.
They're out there. They're making a difference. They're contributing. I hope that people show up and support her as much as they did in her run for mayor, and that they can continue to lift her up. It can only serve to be an example, no matter what the outcome is. Of course, you know, I'm hoping that she'll win. But no matter what, I think, like you said, we're out here. We're continuing to use our voice to create space and to make sure that our issues aren't just being swept to the side in all of this chaos that currently is politics.
Yeah, and I think, you know, because during the midterms, there's traditionally low voter turnout. But when you have these types of stories like the young man running against David Scott, when you have these races and these conversations about, you know, baby boomers, you know, needing to retire, and you see these millennials and these Gen Zers and Gen Xers saying, hey, you know, we want some of the space in Congress and at state legislators and local levels. I think that might energize people to maybe want to vote. And speaking of voting, midterm primaries are today in Texas, North Carolina, and Arkansas, all red states. But all with a lot of Black candidates that have energized campaigns. Like we talked about Jasmine Crockett, you know, last week and yesterday about how she's polling high, but even when you're polling high, you still keep your head down and you still knock it and you're still calling and you're still kissing babies and you're still showing up to the hair salons, the grocery stores, the malls, the nightclubs. I mean, and so she is still probably right now, you know, calling and along with other candidates. So we will be tracking those elections and we'll bring you those election results tomorrow. But if you're in the states of Texas, North Carolina, and Arkansas, you definitely want to head to the polls today. And the great thing about the Black press is, you know, it's not just news, but it's also advocacy. So, you know, you might want to check with your local Black newspaper because a lot of times they have slates. And slates are who they endorse, who they say you should vote for. And a lot of times people go into the polls and they're like, well, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican, but I don't know who to vote for. Well, if you check with your Black newspaper, 9 chances out of 10, they have made it easy for you from top to bottom, from governor to federal seats, all the way down to your local elections. I know we have it here. The Los Angeles Sentinel puts out a slate every election time, and it makes it so easy. So, I mean, check your mail. You know, you have however you're registered, your slate is there. But most importantly, check with your Black press to see who they're talking about. That's inspiring, empowering our Black communities. So we have a guest this morning, which kind of ties into this conversation as we talk about tenure, as we talk about intergenerational conversations, passing the baton. Our guest is the author of Aging While Black, a radical reimagining of aging and race in America. Welcome, Raymond A. Jetson.
Good morning, greetings, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be here.
Honored to have you. And so talk to us and tell us a little bit about Aging While Black.
Well, it's interesting, the connection between the conversation that you were just having, which I heard on so many levels. First of all, as a former elected official, I served almost 4 terms in the Louisiana House of Representatives. I stepped aside. I think it's important to note that there's a fine line between being there long enough to figure out how to get things done and being there too long to become part of the status quo. And that requires a significant degree of self-awareness and a genuine interest in serving people rather than self in order to recognize that. I would also caution two things. One, we have to be very careful that we don't put these artificial lines that are driven by a number on somebody's birth certificate that does not reflect their level of competence or cognizance or ability to function in that moment. The other thing I would say, particularly as Black people, this whole notion of Sankofa, you will recognize the bird is on the cover of the book. I believe that it is a critical governing principle for us. We have to make benevolent use of the past. We have to be able to understand what is of value in our past to shape our present and our future. But those of us who are able to dig into our past need to recognize that it's not about glorifying the past or those from the past, but to shape the present and the future. And so in the book, one of the things that I talk about is this notion of reciprocal wisdom sharing. How do we create these frameworks where the wisdom of the elders and the brilliance of younger generations are connected to create stronger families, stronger communities, stronger neighborhoods, stronger institutions? I have always valued intergenerational relationships. My partner at Aging While Black is an absolutely brilliant millennial Black woman, and I learn as much from her as she could possibly learn from me. And the last thing that I will say is I founded a social enterprise called Metromorphosis, focused on inner city neighborhoods, and I recently stepped away in the end of December of last year. But I was practicing intergenerational relationship with another millennial. And I wrote a piece that was in the Chronicle of Philanthropy entitled Moving Over But Not Out. We have to figure out how those of us who've been around for a while, I am in my 43rd year of public life. We have to figure out how we get out of the way so that the brilliance that's following us has space to grow, but that we are also close enough to contribute and to be a resource for that brilliance.
You brought up benevolent use of the past, and I wasn't the only one. Somebody else in the chat brought that up. That struck out to me. And when you talk about benevolent use of the past, and we look at what our nation is doing to the erasure of the Black history of our past, how, under this Trump administration, how do we balance that of maintaining a benevolent use of our past when they're trying and passing it down to another generation when they are constantly erasing it?
So two things. First of all, we have to have this memory check to remind ourselves that America in general has never valued our existence, our who we are, our culture, our contributions, while undeniable, are always devalued. And so we can't be shocked that is happening, but we have to resist and reject the notion that the very instruments of government are being utilized to dismantle it. And so we have to protect what it is that is about us to protect. I loved your comment earlier about things being torn down in this federal infrastructure. And we have to balance that tension between the reality that, well, it wasn't really quite working well for us in the first place. And so we don't need to rush to put out the fire that's burning down something that did not serve us well. We might want to spend time with the architects figuring out what we're going to design when this thing crumbles. while also saving the critical parts that protect the most vulnerable among us. We have to push back legally. We have to push back with the institutions and structures that we do have, but we also have to begin to build what's forward. These folks are going to do what they are going to do. And there doesn't appear to be any real roadblocks in the way to disrupt it. And so when we go back to this question of benevolent use of the past, two things can be true. Number one, this isn't the first time we've seen this. That's true. But secondly, the tools we used to deal with it before aren't going to get it done now. And that's where these generations connecting are important. You know, the silent generation that remains among us who lived through Jim Crow, the older baby boomers who were on the tip of the spear for the civil rights movement. They've seen vicious racism and violence perpetrated on Black bodies up close and personal. But the same tools that we used then aren't going to get it done now. And so that's where the social activism of younger generations, that's where the tech savviness, the entrepreneurial and social innovative spirits of younger generations have to be married with that wisdom so that we come up with a strategy that allows all of us to be well.
Jill, I'll turn it over to you. You have a question?
So I agree with so much that you're saying. How do those conversations work with both sides, talking to our elders about reaching out and connecting with millennials and utilizing social, as well as convincing Gen Z that there is purpose and value in taking community with those that are older than you, maybe significantly older than you, to move ahead?
Thank you for the question. So Aging While Black, the movement, which the book was actually written to articulate in greater depth than keynote addresses or podcasts or other elements. The book, Aging While Black, is built upon three pillars. The first is recalibrate the village. We have to recognize not only the centrality in the village in terms of who we are as a people and the connectedness. You know, we initially started this conversation around some recent Pew research, which told us what we already know. Black people are connected, and it's not always blood that connects us. We live in village. But the village needs to be recalibrated, because what it meant to be Black in America in 1965 is not what it means in 2026. Also, the infrastructure that supports Black life is ill-equipped for the sea change in aging that's already happened. There are 11,000 people a day turning 65 in America. Started about 8 years ago and will continue to the year 2040. The number of Black people over the age of 65 will triple within the next 20 years. And so there is this serious aging thing happening, and our infrastructure, whether it's social organizations, civic organizations, Greek letter, Masonics, congregations, mosques, we aren't ready for that. And so we need to think about our village and how do we make certain that we all age, because as a brilliant sister in Atlanta said to me, aging is a verb. You know, we are all doing it. It's not just something that happens when you reach a magic number of candles on your cake. And so how do we begin to reconnect as a village and recognize not only the external challenges, but the internal realities are shaping us? The second pillar of Aging While Black is embracing innovation and rapid change. And I think here is a critical platform for connecting generations. But it requires moving beyond the obligatory, let me teach you how to operate a phone or iPad thing, which is why in the book, I dismissed the term digital literacy. Literacy suggests a certain deficit is in place. I prefer the term digital empowerment. And so how do we empower older adults to make the most of technology for their well-being, to manage their life, to connect with their families, to battle social isolation? And I think that that's a point of connection. And then the last pillar is leaning into Sankofa. And so how do we make this wisdom available, but in a way that connects with the brilliance of younger generations? And I write in the book that we got to learn how to talk to one another again. We have to work through the discomfort of restarting these intergenerational conversations. I just recently celebrated my 70th birthday. And I grew up next door to my great-grandmother and great-grandfather. And some of my childhood memories are deeply rooted in 4 and 5 generations of my family, all together, having conversations, doing things, arguing, planning, strategizing on how we were going to be well. We got to rediscover that. And our institutions, our anchors, have to help us create platforms to rediscover that. It's not going to be easy, but those of us who are committed to our well-being got to go through the temporary pain to create some long-term good.
Rich conversation right here. First, happy birthday, happy belated birthday. And then you talked about recognizing the village, and one of the cornerstones is our village is the Black church. Yes. And you said a lot of things that, how do we get to where we're trying to go? And the Black church was the cornerstone of that. But then I also heard you say we can't do things like we did yesterday. We have to do things to where we are today. So with all that being said, what do you see is the role of the Black church today?
So I would argue, and talk about points of connection here. I also served for 23 years as a pastor of a congregation that I grew up in, and had a wonderful experience. When I was elected pastor, our first church growth was a -150. We had a congregation of 300 people, and 150 of them left. But 23 years later, we were at about 2,500 people, having significant impact on the community. And the last part of that is what is important. I don't believe that the internally focused, self-serving practice of faith is going to meet the need in this moment. When we talk about the Black church, it's important to recognize that historically, we are talking about a significantly different animal than so many of the iterations of church that we see today. When we talk about the Black church historically, we're talking about the institution that was largely the most viable structure in our community. It had leadership structure in place. The pastor was typically somewhat learned, but always committed to people and community. The church saw itself as a vehicle for Black well-being, not just in the sweet by and by, but right now while I'm getting beat in my head. And so I think that the Black church is critical if it recognizes that its obligation is to the well-being of people and not itself. And that's a critical shift that has to happen. And to intersect this with the Black aging conversation, the one demographic that has not left organized religion are older Black adults, especially older Black women. And so that is a connection here. I would say I see in the chat, the big cheese says that the Black church is irrelevant in 2026. My only response to that is that we can't afford for it to be. It's everywhere. It's in every neighborhood. It's on every street corner. There are still people going there, people who look like me and you, people who live with me and you. And so we can't afford for such a significant infrastructure to be irrelevant. We have to demand relevance.
Yeah, to your point about the ministries of today, Bishop Noel Jones always talks about how the practice or ministry of health, wealth, and prosperity is what got the church on the wrong trajectory. And we have to get out of that health, wealth, and prosperity and get back to service and being what the church used to be. But you also touched on before, we could talk to you forever, so we definitely want to have you back. But I want to talk to you briefly because you touched on, the growing number of seniors and people turning 65. And so on policy and health, given your background in health and human services, what is the most urgent policy change needed right now to ensure Black seniors can age with dignity rather than just survival?
So I think it is a combination of recognizing the critical role that we as Black people share in our aging and our well-being. One of the concepts that I write about at the end of the book is what we have described as collective longevity. And it is this recognition that we are all aging and that it's not about this older generation that's out there somewhere, but it is how do we capitalize on the gifts, talents, abilities, and experiences and passions of every generation? How do we build this infrastructure within our culture, within our communities, within our institutions, with all our families? It is really important that we recognize the need to connect across generations so that we can build the families, the communities that we want to live in. I would say to you that the threats are multiple. When you look at what has happened with I was about to use language inappropriate for this platform, but the Not Beautiful bill and its impact on Medicaid cuts, which provide funding for home and community-based services, and then some of the small between the lines stuff like changing the frequency within which people have to qualify or requalify or redetermine. These are really problematic things. But the reality is, as you guys so eloquently touched on earlier, the federal infrastructure is broken. And so the question becomes now, how do we become active on state and local levels to create? And so I think that we have to be thoughtful. Folks in California are doing, have some wonderful structures in place. The master plan for aging, some of the other Medicaid responses and reforms that are being put in place. We just have to make certain that there is a Black perspective and a Black voice that is clearly in place in these settings.
So representation, Black representation is key. institutions like the Congressional Black Caucus, your Black state legislative caucuses, all those things mean something. To your point, I mean, like, we would love to have you back. And I want to give you a comment. Dr. Marilyn says, Cheese is speaking for himself. The Black church is everything to us. So I thought I'd throw that in. But Mr. Jetson, it has been an honor to have you. Be sure to check out his book, Aging While Black, a radical reimagining of aging and race in America. And thank you, Toyin, your publicist. I'm so glad she knocked on my door again, because we would have missed out on this important and rich conversation.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the job that you do. And to the amazing Big Cheese, my email address is on the screen. I'd love to connect and discuss. It's important that we have space to talk to one another.
That's right. The chat might disagree, but but thank you so much, and we definitely want to have you back.
Thank you very much. Be well.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh my gosh, what a rich conversation to have this morning. Needed that. And intergenerational conversations are so important, because look at how, you know, he sowed seeds and he appreciated what we were saying. And I mean, I think that's how you make the change. And maybe if we had some more of these conversations, there could be more of the passing of the baton, like we were talking about.
Absolutely.
Earlier. And so I think this story too is intergenerational. According to the Jasmine brand, Dorothy Butler Gillum, the first Black woman reporter ever hired at the Washington Post, has contributed $10,000 to a GoFundMe created for members of the Washington Post Guild who were laid off last month. Now, her donation matches two other top gifts of $10,000, which brings the campaign to over $500,000. So reacting to the layoffs, she said, "It made me very sad, even upset, because I know many people read the Post and depend on the Post. And this certainly is one of those times when we need some balance in the information that is available." So, you know, here you have someone who is retired, who was the first, you know, who is seeing, you know, and giving back. But this is hard. I mean, you know, if mainstream media is struggling, you know, Black media is definitely struggling. And to see her do this, there's her book, Trailblazer. I'll just let you respond, Jill.
I think one, it is so beautiful that she, you know, closed the cycle. I talked about it earlier when we were speaking politically of, you know, the situation in Georgia. Reaching back and giving back can happen in many ways. And so standing in the gap for people during a hard time, trying to encourage that giving spirit is so important. As far as where we stand as independent media, especially Black independent media, our voices are important, and it's hard, as you mentioned. No budget. Where's the budget coming from? Where are the sponsors? Where, as with most things, as we talked about earlier with the situation in New York, we are often overlooked, but the work that we put in is what people use to build structure, infrastructure, icons, all types of things. So I think that in connecting it to our conversation about Black aging, one, having spaces where we can talk to each other, promote others, learn about what others are doing that aren't necessarily in our general grouping. I think that is important. And I also think that, you know, making sure that we are, again, referencing the previous conversation, making those connections, seeking out what is new and utilizing it. Black people, you know, as far as social media, I mean, most things, but when you think about what we have been able to build via social media, via the internet in these past couple of years, despite the moments where we have been challenged, in that hand, it's encouraging as far as I'm concerned, because I feel as though community and staying the course is key.
Yes, staying the course. I'm gonna jump a story, Greer, and I'm gonna go back to the Nipsey Hussle story, but I think it falls in line, as we talk about what Miss Butler, what she's done, what Miss Gillum has done, and then we talk about, the struggle of Black media. It's not by coincidence that there's a lack of sponsorship for Black media, and things that were once sponsored and money was flowing. In part, we can go back to 2020 when, unfortunate murder of George Floyd. And then we saw what happened to Ahmaud Arbery. And then we saw what happened to Breonna Taylor and so many other lives that year that Black Lives Matter spoke up for. But there was so many pledges. And Black media was thriving in that time. And then you have an administration now that cuts all of that in the terms of DEI. And so you have Essence Festival organizers and stories coming out how they're under fire for almost $500,000 in unpaid convention and vendor cost. So many are blaming this on DEI rollbacks. I saw comedian Lonnie Love saying that corporate partners were withdrawing or cutting funds for major Black events. And this is what has happened to the Essence Fest. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I think that there's a couple of things there. There was a lot of controversy and conversation, as I'm sure you recall, last summer following that version of Essence Fest, where there were questions of what the focus of Essence was and Essence Fest as a whole. Was it still for Black Americans? There was that whole conversation. Obviously, the DEI portion is huge because we see how this current president is very vindictive when things are happening that he doesn't like and how he reacts. So it's caused several shifts and moves. But to that, much like there was complaints about Target being the title sponsor last summer, these corporations typically lock up for years. So it's interesting. They're all coming up now. Is there a kill fee as far as them pulling out? And one has to, I guess, I know the intent is there, but there has been over the past few years, people having different opinions, varying opinions on Essence Fest and its structure. I think it's another conversation of the old guard and what the new Essence Fest and the younger generation wants to see in that and what direction should they go in. I think a clarity of focus for Essence Fest, not that that won't help this money issue, that's something else. Just prayers, because it would be really sad. I noticed that there haven't been any groups announced yet. There hasn't been any discussion on what is actually happening this summer. They're accepting deposits, but usually we would have an announcement by now of headliners. So I do wonder what ultimately will be taking place.
That's a great point. I know Kenny Burns, he did this whole thing, I think it was last week or week before last, and he announced that Essence Fest would be returning. But to your point, now you would see the lineups. I know another conversation that I remember seeing last year was the aunties versus this new generation. And I went to the first, I haven't been back, but I went to the first Essence Fest. Mary J. Blige was there. We was at Whispers in New Orleans. Okay. I don't even think Whispers is still there anymore, but that was like our thing, like Gen X, right? And so you have these other generations coming in with a different type of mindset. And I think it goes back to Mr. Jackson's book, Aging While Black, having these intergenerational. And how do you combine the two to where you find a medium? Because the last Essence Fest, TikTok was ticking with the aunties who were very disturbed by what they were seeing. And they really didn't want they didn't want no intergenerational mixing. They was like, send them to the iHeart Festival.
I mean, I think that there's some acts. One, I think it's about setting the stage as far as what you want to see. Maybe there is a throwback night or an old school night. I think maybe theming out the nights would help. if you are going to do a mix, make it complementary, right? Like, don't throw a sexy red on per se with an Anita Baker, just throwing things out there. You know, sometimes that can be fun, but there has to be a reverence and a pattern, something to connect it. I think that the aunties that want it just to be, and I'm sorry for using aunties because I really don't use that term. I don't like it. But
okay, we'll talk about that next. We'll keep going.
I think that, you know, you have to create space for them because it was established. This is, you know, something that was birthed out of their creativity, the way that we felt in the 90s and the vibe that was going on then. But if we wanted to continue, much like we were talking about with politics, you have to make space for the generation that is coming behind. You have to, you know, it doesn't mean that they're pushing us out of the way entirely. You know, it just means making space. I think if we think about last year's BET Awards and how there was a combination of old and new acts and it kind of mixed together on stage, I think that worked. So maybe it's getting Jesse Collins Entertainment involved. I don't know.
I love that. Did you see that Jesse Collins just announced yesterday that they will be producing the iHeart Awards for Fox 11?
And
that's huge.
I think it's incredible. I like Jesse Collins used to be on the air here in LA, like when I was growing up. I remember hearing him on the radio. And just to see what he's managed to create and continues to, and showing up for us in that way in all ventures, not just Black focused things, but, you know, other categories, I think is incredible and amazing. And maybe he could help out Essence Fest.
Right. Okay. So we'll keep tracking this Essence Fest as they continue. I know we had some comments. Orange G said the new generation doesn't spend dollars like the aunties. And then he says, Neo, that club was my old stomping ground. And so, yeah, Whispers used to be the hit. So we'll keep tracking that as the Essence Fest approaches, but want to fast forward to and move on over to the West Coast. On Saturday, Jill and I had the opportunity to celebrate the life and legacy of Nipsey Hussle as officials dedicated the intersection of Crenshaw and Slauson as Nipsey Hussle Square. Now, what made this bigger than hip hop was to see how many electeds participated in this movement for Nipsey. Los Angeles City Council President Marquise Harris Dawson, who has been at the forefront and who worked with Nipsey Hussle on some of his projects while he was living in our community. Council member Heather Hutt and Assembly member Isaac Bryan were among the electeds in attendance. His family were front and center. And I wonder if we could play this song. Jill was there and she was getting interviews from Black Sam. And I wonder if we could play this clip.
You know, coming up, dealing with the old reputation of South LA.
I think for me it's important and we're honored. That was really Bro's mission. He wanted to make sure that, you know, when you're young and trying to get some money, I think that's the first thing. You just want to get yourself established, but Hussle always wanted to do more. He felt he had a bigger purpose, and his whole thing was to inspire specifically the youth and start from the area where he came from. So it's just an honor to be able to name this section Nipsey Hussle Square. And I think even his quote being up there, the highest human act is to inspire, I think this is just, it's fitting and just very appreciative. And hopefully it does inspire.
It does. You also helped kick off an economic boom where people wanted self-empowerment and to do for themselves. Can you tell me a little bit about how that means as a man to inspire many men, many children that come along economically to take back their power?
Yeah, I think for us, man, once again, when we're young, you're just looking for role models. You're looking for opportunity, especially financially, when you're coming from situations where you may not have much. So anything that's outside of the box, that's not crime, that's not going to end you up in jail, I think is a plus. And that was one thing Hustle wanted to always do, educate and pass down the education. And that's why he really bigged up technology and being on top of new technology and teaching the kids technology young. And that's something that we want to make sure that once we get this location open, we be the forefront of that.
Great job, Jill.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate that. I mean, as you stated, it was an incredible day, very moving. I know it had to be probably painful to come back to the scene of where your loved one was taken from you, to flip that and use it as a source of empowerment. I did speak a bit to Marquise and Heather about kind of what this moment means, because it has to be more than a sign for South LA, especially as there's so many changes that are happening, and what direction are we going in? And so, kind of echoing what Black Sam said there, Nipsey's brother, Heather indicated that she wanted to make people that are coming to South LA just to visit or see that invest in the community, as well as one of the big themes of the weekend was us reinvesting in our communities. We say we want to see them grow, but oftentimes we leave them, or we don't return to shop or to put up businesses or roots. And we have to make that a function of how we move ahead as well.
Yeah, it definitely was a beautiful day. We heard from Lauren London. We heard from Nipsey's sister. And we also heard from Lauren London and Weezy's son.
Cameron.
Cameron, who spoke to what you were saying about it. Was he didn't want to pass by that intersection. He was like, but now it's changed. And he saw hope on that corner because of the legacy of Nipsey Hussle. And so it was just a beautiful day. And you could check out more of that interview. How can people learn more about, even the article that you wrote?
You can check out eurweb.com for that article and more. You can also check out my YouTube channel, Stiletto Jill, where Black Sam's full speech is featured, and a couple of other moments for the day.
All right. And we'll get more info about Jill and her show on KBLA in a few minutes. But I want to talk about this story. This one is trending, and I'm excited because I'm going to see Raphael Sadiq tonight at the Blue Note. And so I'm excited about that. But this story, the reason why I'm saying this, Chad, is about Raphael Sadiq and him sharing his perspective of the origins of the term neo soul, which was something that was coined in the 90s by Motown Records, when you had D'Angelo, you had Erykah Badu. So in a post, Raphael Sadiq wrote, himself, D'Angelo, and Maxwell are not neo soul artists. Sorry, but that's the truth. Neo soul was a term created by one Black executive purely as shorthand. It helped labels internally identify which acts would not require crossover marketing budgets. Those funds were reserved for the pop boy bands. Now, him saying this, there was only one executive that coined this term, and that was Kedar Massenberg. So was he taking shots?
I think so, a little bit. I think Kedar did create the phrase. He's copyrighted it. He created it to help him market Erykah Badu. But I think that it was a necessary category at that time to help define this space of R&B that wasn't what R&B was popular wise at that time. If you think about it, we were coming off of the New Jack Swing era, and there were lots of groups. It was a younger time for R&B.
And it was Uptown. It was Uptown. Andre Harrell, Diddy, Mary, and all of that. Yeah,
that was what was running R&B. Lots of groups: Shy, Boyz II Men, Jodeci. Silk, all of these
intro.
Exactly. And so I think when you had someone like Erykah Badu, whose sounded like nothing that was dropping in 97 or 98 when she first launched. Yes, it was a marketing thing, but then under that funnel, acts like India Arie. I mean, there's so many groups that came in that were kind of this alternative R&B. Now, maybe Raphael feels that it boxed him in. I actually worked with D'Angelo. I worked at Virgin Records on his last album. I have the platinum plaque for that. Jill Scott as well. But I think that the feeling at that time, it was something else, and it created a vibe. It separated it from R&B. Now, you can say it was looked at as to not give crossover budget, but let's be honest. Were they giving a lot of crossover budget to those R&B acts anyway at that time? I can answer that. No, they weren't. If they were giving any crossover budget, it would be to the hip hop artists, because those were the ones that were moving up and capturing the youth as far as MTV goes. Most of our R&B acts weren't really featured on MTV at that time, who was on its ascension as well. So,
yeah, I like to jump in on this one because I think to Jill's point, you know, neo soul was a very narrow category at that time. And you know, I mean, basically you had to be Black, right? And in urban communities and all a part of the poetry community, like it was a community. It was not this major, you know, mainstream. It may have felt like that to us because we were surrounded. That was the microcosm we were living in, right? And so I think that, you know, oftentimes we look back and reflect on these moments, and we see somebody like Erykah Badu who, you know, who came from that, but she ascended, you know, that the so-called neo soul, and you know, and Raphael, in a sense, you know, he was back then. Even he was an OG. You know, when you think about it, right? He was the OG. You know, and that it still is, right? And so I hip hop operated totally took over that market in terms of money. That's where the money was going. You know, neo soul was a very slim and marginal, you know, community. I think people, you know, when we reflect on it, we've hyped it up more than what it was.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, I think his takeaway was that, well, what he's trying to say was that, you know, somebody made it a code word for decreasing their value. I mean, I think that's what he's trying to say.
I disagree with him on that, because as stated, the R&B budgets were losing that crossover money because they weren't on MTV. They weren't on TRL, not because there was this created category that automatically devalued them. If anything, it created space and a sort of cushioning around it, something that people could turn to and say, okay, now I can identify that. I know what that sound is, to those that weren't, to Greer's point, within the community, right? And didn't quite understand it, but maybe felt it. It gave them something to look towards. He may have looked at it as limiting. Obviously, he started out in 88 or 87 and Tony. They weren't considered neo soul, but the market switched up. So I can see why it may feel limiting to him, but I feel like it actually helped extend the life of some artists.
Yeah, I love what you just said. That's so true.
Yeah. Dr. Mellon says it seems like neo soul artists were independent. And
not all of them, but a lot of them, you know.
Yeah, she says it seems like somebody is saying, do you think Ben, I want to be that? Oh gosh. Okay. Sometimes people talk.
I think that Kedar is really the one. When his label came about, he created space for those, because a lot of them did have their own little underground looking for a deal. And so when Kedar opened up his label, you know, that became that space for them to fill, right? To really become more mainstream. But you know, I agree with you, Jill. Them, like that community being insular in that way, allowed the creativity to grow. Remember, literally, you know, in some ways, I mean, it was hip hop, but Kanye came out of that community with Pharoah Monch. You know what I'm saying? Those guys, it was all underground.
Yeah. Well, interesting.
Much love to Raphael.
I know. I mean, look at the evolution of him. I mean, his credits behind the scene are probably bigger than, you know, his projects that he's talking about, right?
Probably going to get an Oscar in 2 weeks.
Okay. So it's the behind the scenes sometimes that gets you. where you need to be. But we'll continue to track this story. I mean, it is interesting conversation, like aging in America. You know, this is about the music side of the business, and you know, in hindsight, looking at things and how, you know, people see it. So we'll see if Kedar has a response to this, because it definitely was a arrow at him for sure.
Sure was. He has it in his Instagram bio. I created what's known as neo soul or something like that.
Okay. All right. So we'll continue to track that. And let's head to the 2026 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame fan vote, which is back. And I think that New Edition has reignited something within this Hollywood. I mean, not Hollywood, but Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So over the weekend, Michael Bivins put a call out to all the Candy Girls. And when I tell you, baby, we responded, they were at the bottom of the charts. Over the weekend, he had all of us voting. And so now they're currently number 2, just under Phil Collins. Phil Collins is holding that number 1 spot strong. Okay. It hasn't moved at all. But New Edition has managed to come get to number 2. I know I saw Method Man saw what was going on, so he started. But they still, Wu-Tang is still trying to move the needle. But for those who want to participate, your vote gives you the opportunity to cast your ballot for who you want to see join the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class of 2026. And of course, the nominees include Phil Collins, Miss Melissa Etheridge, Lauryn Hill, NXS, New Edition, Pink, Shakira, Luther Vandross, Wu-Tang Clan, and others. But what I don't know, and maybe you can help me with this, Jill. I know that there is a group of people that actually cast the vote. So what is the difference between a fan vote and like part of the Hall of Fame Academy vote, or, you know, people who vote?
I don't know if they give it one slot. I think there are maybe 7 slots that are available, and maybe the fan vote automatically gives whomever they select a pass in, or to those things. I think it's something along those lines, or it automatically means that they make it to the final selection round where the body votes on it. But I'm like you, I saw it on Ralph's page and Bobby's page. They said to get active. I was like, well, let me get active. You know, Candy Girls are going to pull it together for New Edition. This is 40 years of dedication, hard at work. I think I would imagine the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is probably a little surprised by how activated the Any for Lifers went in on that, because it definitely, I was like, oh, at the bottom, listen.
It made all the difference in the world. And you can vote every day up until April 3rd. And what I also loved about it is you can vote for other people as well. You can vote for 7 people. So, you know, in addition to New Edition, you know, I was able to vote for Luther Vandross, Sade, Lauryn Hill, Mariah Carey, Wu-Tang Clan, and I voted for Phil Collins, because, I mean, the 80s was a time where there were no color lines in music.
Let me tell
like
you,
a Bon Jovi.
It's a good mix. I really like NXS. I Need You Tonight. That was my jam back in the day. Oasis is in there. I have some feelings for that. Pink, you know, we know Pink was signed to LaFace. That first album was a thing. Pink has always been fair. So I think that it was a great group of nominees. Both Mariah and Sade are on their multiple nominations. I will say this about Phil Collins, though. I believe that he will get in, but I personally won't be disappointed if he does not, because he was entered in back in 2010 with his group. So it's not like he's not in there, you know?
Right. That's true. That's true. But I think too, you know, on the flip side, him being number 1 and has not budged, he's the only one. I think that as people are voting for New Edition, we voting for him too. Has to be, because
I mean, come on, In the Air Tonight, that is from the 80s.
From the 80s, Miami Vice, you know. So you guys can vote. All you have to do is go to vote vote.rockhall.com. So that's vote.rockhall.com. And you can go vote for your favorite nominees. Last story of the day before we get into Black Facts. Did you catch the total lunar eclipse last night?
I didn't catch it. I knew it was happening. I was actually up getting ready for this, but I didn't look outside to see it.
I did not catch it. I wanted to, but I got confused because it said Tuesday night, but it was actually last night instead of like Tuesday night. And so when I just didn't feel like going outside. But if you caught the solar and lunar eclipse, let us know in the chat. And basically the lunar eclipse happens due to a precise alignment of the sun, moon, and earth. The so-called blood moon looks red because of the stray bites of sunlight filtering through the earth's atmosphere. And so there'll be another one in 2028, I believe. So I'll try to catch it then. But I do believe, like, when those types of things happen, you know, I'm a spiritual person. I'm a Christian, but I'm also a spirit. And to me, all of those things matter when things like that happen. So I did think about it.
I mean, it has to be a change energetically. A lot is going on. So hopefully it's a positive change that it's enacting.
Right. For sure. Yes. And so today, for Women's History Month, I want to take you to the year for Black Facts, to the year of 1973, where Grammy success happened at the 15th Annual Grammy Awards. Aretha Franklin won Best R&B Vocal Performance Female for Young, Gifted, and Black. And Roberta Flack won Record of the Year and Song of the Year for The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face. So those are your Black History facts. There's, you know, Mother Aretha, who never went anywhere without her purse. And of course, you know, Roberta Flack, For the First Time Ever I Saw Your Face. And before we let you go, any thoughts about the NAACP Awards, the SAG Awards, and looking at the Academy Awards? What's your take on Michael B. Jordan?
So, I mean, I think it is interesting. The Actors Award is voted for by his actual peers. So that is very interesting to me. It's not like it's critics. So they loved his performance. It's been Timothy Chalamet, others. I feel like the Oscars is more traditional, but Sinners has proved to be a force. And we will have to see what it comes up with. I think that it's 16 nominations. I definitely feel that it will take some of the technical awards, cinematography, best screenplay, costume design, things of that nature. But I'm curious to see what this looks like as far as those big ones. The Image Awards, that's us and excellence, showing up and showing out. We always appreciate that. And I just appreciated the cast, especially Delroy and Michael, being loved on and supported after having to endure that, you know, embarrassment at BAFTA, and just showing support for us and our story.
Well, there you have it. You heard it from Jill Munroe, TV and film critic and host of the Jill Munroe Show on KBLA Talk Radio. Tell us when the show is on and how we can listen and watch, and, you know, how to keep up with you.
So I'm on the air 6 p.m. Monday through Thursday on KBLA Talk 1580. You can listen live on the radio. There's a YouTube stream. I also have a YouTube channel, which you just saw on Fridays at 5 o'clock. I stream on there with my Front Row Live. Check me out. It's a weekly culture check-in and recap. And yeah, Monday through Thursday, KBLA Talk 1580, 6 p.m.
Would love to have you back. And thanks for, you know, getting up this early and having this fun conversation.
Listen, I appreciate you, Neil. You have, since you were at Fox Soul, always been one to reach out. You highlight issues. You reach out to Black talent. You are not someone that ever overlooks people that are up and coming in various areas. And it is appreciated what you're doing here and your voice. So thank you for thinking of me. I would love to come back.
Yeah, I'm doing it on a Friday too, so we can have fun on the field. And you're off on Friday, or maybe
I am
not.
I am off on Friday. I am off of KBLA, so I am always here for you. Let me know. I enjoyed it. Thank you to your guests for being so inspiring, and thankful to the chat for welcoming me in. I appreciate it.
All right, you guys, we'll be back tomorrow with those results from Texas, Arkansas, and the Carolinas. So tap in with us and have a good day. Peace and love.